Join us every Friday for encouragement, freedom, and biblical truth. Grab your coffee or grab your tea. It's going to be a good one. Right, hello everyone. You can hear my beautiful scratchy voice still, so I got my throat lozenges, my tea, and my water. But I need to kind of jump in really quick because our guest tonight, he's on a time crunch, and I don't want to interfere in any of that. So I cannot say hello to everyone this evening. My apologies. But we have back on, as you can see, we are talking about the seals in the book of Revelation. And none other than Mondo Gonzales is back with us. And we're going to try to make this a 3-part series once he's done with his European shenanigans that I'm highly jealous of for like forever. And then hopefully he'll be back on, Lord willing, October, November, December, somewhere around there. And we'll finish up one series on the trumpets. The next series is going to be the bowls, vials, or whatever your version says. So I think that's it. I mean, there's really not much of an introduction. If you haven't hit the like button, go ahead and do so. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Again, I am not everyone's cup of tea. I might have to mute my mic to cough a little bit, but I have Ricola. I guess that's the commercial. I don't know. Is that a at the end of that? Ricola? I don't know. Yeah, Mondo? Sandra? Am I right on that? Sure? Okay, I don't know. All right, so without further ado, what I'm going to do is... I first don't do the mug. This is like my own personal thing that I bought. So can I just do this really quick, Mondo? Good. Okay. So, I'm very unique. And while I was going mug shopping for myself, I noticed this adorable cup and I bring this to work and it says, I'll get over it. I just need to be dramatic first. So there's the pig being all dramatic. And then when I'm over and done, see how cute? Oh my gosh. It's so adorable. But anyway, I'm going to bring Mondo on now, though, Sandra, because this week's mug has to do with him. So I'm going to put him on the spot here for a minute. So let's go ahead and add you. How are you tonight, brother?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here.
Good. Thank you for allowing me to introduce my cute little mug here. It's so cute. I love it. I don't know. I do need to be dramatic. So, but this week's mug is actually for you. So Sandra, go ahead and hit play on that. Okay. So for those who do not know, Mondo, he likes to do this thing called jogging and running and climbing up mountains and stuff. And yeah, that just wears me out. So I decided to get this mug because I knew that he was coming on and I thought it was quite fitting for Mr. Mondo Gonzales. It says, I wanted to go jogging, but Proverbs 28:1 says, the wicked run when no one is chasing them. So, Mondo, there's that. So this is for you this week.
That's a great verse.
Well, you know, I don't know. You're running. So, for all those runners in there, I don't know. The wicked run when no one is chasing them. How does that make you feel? I guess you're never coming back on.
When I was younger, I connected with that verse a lot because I was very mischievous, and so I always thought someone was after me. So it's a true proverb.
It is, and now you're just running to stay healthy. So I don't want to mock you because that's great. I wish I could run 50 miles a day. All right, so are you ready to dive in?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to kind of dive in and then we'll leave about the last 20 minutes open for questions. So it's now 7:05. So I guess around 7:40-ish or 6:40-ish your time or whatever time it is on the East Coast. We will then open the floor to questions. So what we're going to do, Mondo, is we're going to dive into the 6 seals of Revelation. And what's exciting about this is so many people have different opinions about what some of them mean. So I'm going to first present my screen here and open the Word of God this evening. And so I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And as we can see here on the screen, we've got Revelation chapter 6 and verse 1. It says, "Then I saw when the Lamb broke one of the seven seals, and I heard," so clearly there's seven, but here in chapter 6, we only see six, and then we'll get to the seventh in chapter 8. "I heard one of the four living creatures saying as with a voice of thunder, 'Come.'" So let me just stop right there, Mondo. Who is the Lamb? People say that that's not actual Christ, it's the devil. So can you help us unpack that very first verse?
Yeah, I think I'll apologize. I'm out on an adventure doing some archaeology in Arkansas, and the hotel did not have internet, so I'm in my truck trying to do this on my phone. So apologize for that if the quality is not as good as it should be. But the challenge here, or not even the challenge, I think the consistency, as always, jumping into any chapter of the Bible, it's important to understand what preceded it in the context. And so I think in just real quick, in chapter 1, verse 19 and 20, you have Jesus giving an outline of the book of Revelation, that write the things that you have seen, which is chapter 1. It was a vision of Jesus. John saw him on the island of Patmos. Write the things which are chapters 2 and 3 in reference to the seven churches. And then those things which will be after these things, metatauta. It's a very specific phrase in the Greek. Metatauta also appears to help us in chapter 4, verse 1, which tells us that what you see in chapter 4, verse 1 is after the things which would be chapters 2 and 3, or what we'd understand as to be the church age. That's why many people see chapter 4, verse 1 kind of as a type or a similarity to the rapture, the idea of coming up here, you hear a sound, a voice there. But so just contextually, whether that's true or not, what you do see, though, is 100% that chapter 4 happens after the church age of chapter 2 and 3. And then you get introduced to this scene in heaven where we're introduced to the living creatures, which are important because they appear here. We're also introduced to the group of 24 elders, and then surrounding the throne. And there in chapters 4 and 5, you have God on the throne holding the scroll. Everybody, John is weeping because nobody's worthy. And then, Jesus, the Lamb, it looked as a lamb that was slain, is found worthy to open up the scroll, which a scroll, again, in ancient times was sealed, had 7 seals on it. And so when we jump into chapter 6, we just learned who the Lamb was. It was the Lamb that was slain in chapter 5, which is Jesus himself, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, Revelation 5:5. So to me, this is super important because the timing of these seven, at least these first seals in chapter 6, there is a lot of disagreement. Again, I always like to be congenial to others in the sense of friendly. We love the people that disagree with us, and that's okay. We're not going to call them names, but we can disagree agreeably. And many people think that the 7-year tribulation does not begin here. That what we're going to see over these seals is some bad things that are happening, and we'll talk about those. But oftentimes they're labeled either as the wrath of man, because we'll talk about war, or the wrath of Satan. But I think I'll just say this, and then we can go. The most important thing here is that chapter 6, verse 1, as you have there. Then I saw the Lamb. I saw when the Lamb. So right here at the beginning, the primacy, the supremacy, the sufficiency of Jesus as the Lamb who opens the scroll and who is worthy in chapters 4 and 5. We cannot eliminate Jesus. Jesus is sovereign. He's in control. When these judgments begin to happen, these aren't friendly things by any means. When these judgments begin to occur on the earth, all of them are judgments. They're negative. Jesus is the one that is in charge. So that's a good introduction.
He is in charge. So I'll keep turning my mic off between my nose blowing and my coughing. So, I don't think everyone wants to hear that. So that always baffles me, Mondo, because when people say that it's the devil, I'm like, can they not read? And not in our camp. Like, it's the camp where they just want to misconstrue the whole entire book of Revelations. I said that on purpose. So let's dive into the first seal. And it says, I looked, and behold, a white horse. And he who sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given to him. And he went out conquering and to conquer. So there's a lot of things just in that one passage alone. There's, some people say, symbolism for the color of the horse being white. He had a bow with no arrows. Clearly he has a crown, so power was given to him of some sort. And then went out conquering and to conquer, so he has some form of, whether it be governmental power, military power. So how would you break down, and also if you can, give us some other views. Some people think that might be a system. Some people say that's the Antichrist. So break that down for us, and then also give maybe other viewpoints that our other brothers and sisters have that, again, agree to disagree agreeably.
So I think let's actually go back to verse 1 for a second, because I don't know, maybe read the second half of that, because super important part that we don't want to leave out.
So, and I heard one of the four living creatures, that one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and I heard one of the four living creatures saying as with a loud, with a voice of thunder, come.
Okay. So,
I looked and behold. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is important too, because the phraseology of, there's a lot of phraseology here that appears in other parts of the book Revelation, and this is going to become important when you come to the phrase in chapter 6 verse 17 as it relates to the sixth seal and the idea of the wrath of the Lamb and the wrath of God has come. So there's several, the word there is erchomai. It's a very specific Greek word, but here, this phraseology in chapter 6 verse 1, there's a couple important items here that, first of all, we're introduced to the Lamb. The Lamb is the one in charge, but what he does is he recruits one of the living creatures in order to administer the judgment, because we see that in no surprise in the rest of the book of Revelation, that angels are brought in by God to, the angel cast down his bowl, an angel stood in the sun, an angel went around through heaven, declaring, the eternal gospel in Revelation 14. So again, right here, there's no mention of the devil. There's really no mention of man at first. I think John is wanting us to know that Jesus, the Lamb, is recruiting angels or living creatures in this sense, supernatural agents, to administer judgment and to call forth that which is a judgment. In this case, he uses the word come, which is it's erku in the Greek. It's an imperative of the word erchomai in chapter 6, verse 17. And that'll become important in a minute. But I think there's a lot of words in the book of Revelation where it says come. It's a totally different Greek word. I think what John is wanting us to know is, hey, what's happening here? Jesus is in charge. The angels are in charge through Jesus. The angels are the one calling forth the judgment. This is 100% under the sovereignty of God, and it'll connect with the wrath of the Lamb and the wrath of God that we see in chapter 6, verse 17. So jumping into the next verse, John looks and he sees a white horse. Now, this is important too, because, there's a lot of symbolism. Obviously, the book of Revelation has some symbolism in it. And the first thing that you do when you do biblical exegesis or when you interpret the Bible is, again, if you're going to look at words, you look at the book. You might even look at the same section. Hey, is this word repeated? Is this Greek word repeated? Oh, is this Greek word repeated in the rest of the book? And again, if there's other English words like come, did it use a different Greek word? And so in that regard, I'm going to shut off my other things here, just so that it doesn't make noise.
Yeah, no worries.
So the fact of the matter is, the white horse. Well, where else does a white horse appear? Well, we know Revelation 19. So this immediately should cause us to go within the book of Revelation. There are several white horses. We know that we're going to be on white horses, the army of heaven. But the other guy on a white horse in Revelation 19 is Jesus. So this guy here he's called forth in order to conquer. Conquering and to conquer. It's this idea of Nikeo. It's the idea of a. It's almost always kind of a negative thing in many ways. Not always. It just is. So the white horse. If you compare him to the other guy on the white horse with Jesus, it would be very easy. And I think there's a lot of scholars that would say this is a reference to the Antichrist. Because he comes with a crown. Jesus has crown. So is this a good guy or a bad guy? Well, some people actually say that this is Jesus.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't agree with that statement, especially because I would say we have the lamb there in verse 1, but this guy's in tongue in cheek, this guy has bad company. He doesn't have good friends. His friends are not good for humanity. And so this figure is coming out. He has a bow. A crown was given to him. Now that's important too. What does that tell us? Who's giving him the crown?
Mm-hmm.
This tells us again that this figure is subservient to the sovereign providential will of God. Whatever's happening in chapter 6, verse 1 with these seals, Jesus is the one holding it, and the angels calling him out. And this figure is given by God's permission the ability to go out and to conquer. And we know that. Why would we think it's the Antichrist? Well, that seems very consistent with Daniel 9:27, the prince of the people that would come, who makes a covenant with Israel, with the many. Daniel 11:33 is very clear that the many is Israel. So there's no confusion there. So when the Antichrist comes in Daniel 9:27 to make a covenant with the many, or Israel, for that 70th week, we know many things about him. That's specifically as it relates to Israel in Daniel 9:27, because why? Daniel 9:24 says the 70 weeks are about Israel and about specifically the city of Jerusalem. So, but when we step back and we try to say, well, who is a guy, who's somebody at the end who is given authority to go out and to conquer, and conquering and conquer, he has a bow. And he's coming on a white horse, which we'll see in the next one that it seems to be that he comes at least in the context of peace, because we'll see why in the next horse. But so we know in 2 Thessalonians 2, Revelation 13 later, that the Antichrist figure is given authority from the dragon to rule, very specifically. So is this person the Antichrist? I think that the best evidence is yes.
What about a system? Some people think that it might be a system.
Are you talking? Because I can't hear you.
Yeah. Oh, you can't hear me? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello? Can anyone hear me? Sandra, can you hear me?
Let me see. Oh, hold on a minute.
Are you muting me? Is that what we're doing?
Try it again with me.
We're not talking to Kim tonight. We're muting her. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Are you there?
Yup, I'm here.
Okay, now we're back. I am so sorry.
You're muting me. I got you. Listen, no. He's not coming back, guys. I'm going to find someone else to do part 2 and part 3. Bye, Mondo. No, I'm teasing.
If I get some better technology or so. Yes, okay. So hopefully you heard what I said. But
I did. I heard everything.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So while I was looking for the book of Hezekiah, you decided to mute me. So some things will never die. What I was asking was, is some of our fellow brethren think that this is a system and not an actual person? What say you?
Well, I don't. In the book of Revelation, I would say yes. It's you can't separate the beast from the person, because in the book of Revelation, if you do that, if you try to force it to only be referenced to one, because again, even in Revelation 13, you have a beast out of the sea, and then they worship the beast. They're not worshiping a system necessarily; they're worshiping a person. Satan gives his authority to the beast to do a certain thing. We have the mark of the beast. So I think that I wouldn't argue with it. I'd say, yeah, of course, this is in reference to a system which ultimately is personified in a single individual. So I have no problem saying, if somebody wants to say that it's a beast system, yeah, I'm on board. But I wouldn't. I would probably resist saying that it is only in reference to a beast system, because we know there's a person. Obviously, 2 Thessalonians 2 tells us there's a person. So my question for those that would say that it is the beast system, I'd say, okay, what are you saying? What's your point? That. Are you? I would ask them nicely, of course. Are you saying that the beast system doesn't include a figure of an Antichrist person, human being? I think all of them would probably say, "Oh, well, yeah, it does." So I don't think it's really worth arguing about here.
Right. I gotcha. All right. So let's move on to the second seal. Can personally believe that this may be where Ezekiel 38 sits. So it says, when that's referring to the gentleman we just spoke about here in verse 2. I'm sorry, no, it's not. My bad. Be quiet.
The Lamb.
Right, the Lamb. When Jesus, broke the second seal, I heard the second living creature saying, "Come," and another, a red horse, went out, and to him who sat on it, it was granted to take peace. I have it highlighted in mine. From the earth. So clearly, I don't want to jump right on your parade. So clearly there had to have been peace in order to take peace. That's how I read that. From the earth, and that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. So let me just back up a little bit. This is where confusion comes in, especially with the rider on the first horse, because now we're also saying him in a term of a red horse. So how would you explain that then?
So, I think a couple things. If someone would say, "Hey, Mondo, to be consistent, is this a literal horse?" I would say, no, I don't believe it's a literal horse. There's no doubt this is imagery that's being used to talk about certain events. The first one was the event of the Antichrist figure and his system coming into play. This would be, in my opinion, it's post-rapture. Right here, I think that the 7-year tribulation begins in chapter 6, verse 1. Not everybody does, but I do, and others do as well. The typical classical dispensational viewpoint is that this is consistent with Daniel 9:27 and the start of the 70th week. Not everybody believes that. That's okay, but in the same way, this isn't. We don't want to be hyper literal either. That, oh my gosh, there's the Antichrist actually riding a white stallion of some kind. No. This is simply giving us the imagery that an event has occurred. So the event is the system or the person has arrived. And in this sense, you have a couple things super important here, and you have them highlighted. Jesus is the one, again, breaking the seal. He's in charge.
Totally messed up on that. I knew what I meant, but it didn't come out that way.
It's good. And he's recruiting a living creature. Again, who the living creature is giving command. It's a second person imperative in the Greek, erku. So you have the authority that these people, who even the first horse, they are subservient not only to Jesus the Lamb, but they're subservient to this very mighty living creature that's giving them permission. They are withheld and restrained for a certain time until this event is allowed to take place. So in this regard, I think you nailed it, that has there ever been peace on the entire earth in every last place? No. But in general, I think one of the problems that you have in interpreting the really, I would say the end time prophecies is that we tend to put things into our own context. So, for example, we have the war in Russia with Ukraine, and they're talking about world war, and they're like, and people are asking, "Are we in the tribulation?" And you're like, "Man, dude, we're not even close to being in the tribulation." My life right now, I'm going to be going out playing around into some caves, looking for some giants. I mean, my life is pretty pretty casual right now. When
Mhm.
this happens, Jesus talks about the entire tribulation, and most specifically, it's building up. It's birth pangs, right? Birth pangs are bad. They're not pleasant, but they're building up from the beginning of the tribulation all the way to the end. And then when we get to the second half, he calls it the worst time in the history of creation itself. Mark 13:19. That includes the flood. So
Mhm.
what happens in chapter 6 right here, what are we on, verse 3, with the red horse, is this really is war breaks out everywhere worldwide. This begins to set the stage. Jesus says in Matthew 24, yeah, you're going to hear wars and rumors of wars. Don't be worried. The end is not here. That's nothing to be concerned about. You're always going to have that. But when this takes place, now peace from the earth is removed. It's going to affect every person. I'm not going to be out. Well, I won't be here, Lord willing, because I'll be taken in the rapture. People aren't going to be out, worried about cave spelunking or caving. All of a sudden, worldwide war is going to happen, and we're going to see some of the fruit from it in the next few. But also, twice it says that men would slay one another. A great sword was given to him, and it was granted for him. So granted and given, two things. Again, we got to remember that God is in charge here. These are judgments, not of man,
Mhm.
not of Satan. These are judgments that can only be given by God himself. And the lamb's right there. It says he, so we don't have to worry. It's supernatural with the lamb involved.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's move on. Are you good with that? With the next
Yeah.
seal?
Yeah,
Okay.
to stay on track, I think we'll have to.
Yes. Okay, so when he broke the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, "Come." I looked and I saw a black horse, or behold, a black horse. And he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard something like a voice in the center of the four living creatures saying, "A quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not damage the oil and the wine." A lot of nuggets in that, a lot of debate. Is it dealing with the economy? Are the rich still okay with the oil and the wine? What say you, Mondo?
So again, I think as we're consistent here, we would say that each of these horsemen represent an event, and that event includes a lot of things. Again, the first event is the beast system and the beast figure coming on the scene in order to conquer, given power to conquer, conquering and to conquer. Again, that's his goal, is to take dominion over the entire world. And once the rapture takes place, that beast system, the restraining, whatever, it doesn't matter who you call it, doesn't. I don't want to get into that debate. The restraining influence is removed, and therefore it's allowed. And there's going to be some events that follow, that are subsequent, that come out of the fruit of that system. One of them here we saw is war, and then oftentimes we're seeing this even now. Not that it's a fulfillment, but we see again the subsequent ramifications of war in Ukraine. So just this week, what do you see? You see Russia bombing some grain. And that's causing a whole bunch of problems as it relates to the food supply. So when you have worldwide war, could this include nuclear? Why not? I wouldn't be surprised. But you're going to have problems now with hyperinflation. So it's interesting here that this phraseology that is used, this voice that comes out of the center of from the center of the four living creatures, we don't know who that voice is. That most likely probably would be God, or maybe the one sitting on there, because the four living creatures are surrounding the throne. We don't really need to know that. But this phraseology is super important, because if you do the calculations here, let me ask you this. What's the minimum wage in your city?
A minimum wage is $11 an hour in Florida.
Okay, so $11, 8 hours a day. Let's just say that's $88. Let's round up for $100 to $100. Okay, so the average person, minimum wage, maybe not the average, but the lowest person at least, is making $100 a day. So a denarius is a 1 day wage. So that could be more for others or less, right? Depending. But let's go to the bottom. Let's go to the lowest denominator here. In this case, the 3 quarters of barley, if you calculate that out, that's basically a loaf of bread. So imagine going to the store now, and a loaf of bread is 1 day's wage, $188.
Wow.
So that is, now you're talking about these people that are left there, then that are coming under the wrath of God, which again is mentioned in verse 17. These people now, war has taken place. The beast system is now coming into play. That event has started. War has begun, and one of the ramifications is immediately a judgment is hyperinflation. So you're going to start thinking in terms of, how do I stay ahead of the game? Maybe you got a 1 year supply or 2 year supply, whatever. But you're going to be really worried. And let's go to the next one, because this is where you see even more specifications as it relates to these events come into play, and then the kind of the cumulative effects.
So let me just ask one question. How come in some it says he, and some it says lamb? How come there's not consistency, at least in this version?
We'd have to look at it in the Greek, because if you see the little cross there, a little T or something, it looks like you're reading the NASB. I'd be curious what the marginal note said there, of what they made a translation.
You mean that T? That's my highlighting.
That
stands. Yeah. So
okay.
I can highlight it. Yeah.
So we'd have to look at it in the Greek to see if it's using the word lamb or switching back and forth. I think that would be very interesting.
I've always wondered that. Off topic. Okay. So when the Lamb broke the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature saying, "Come." I looked, and behold, an ashen horse, or in some versions it says pale. And he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades, that's just so creepy, was following with him. Authority was given to them over a fourth of the earth to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by the wild beasts of the earth. There's a lot to unpack there. So
again, what we're dealing with is events. These aren't literal horses. Some people, death and Hades, some people try to connect it with Isaiah 28, talking or previous gods. Some people see it that way, which again, I don't see it that way, but that's okay, because death, thanatos, is in the Greek, is very specifically a god figure, at least in the mythology of Greek thinking, as well as Hades. Hades is a person who was, quote, the god of the underworld, as well as the underworld itself. So you kind of have those together, but I don't think we would get sucked into that necessarily. But again, I see these as events. And what do you have? It's interesting that there in verse 8, this event of the first horse, second, third, fourth is now coming into play, because it says that this pale horse, followed by Death and Hades, they were given. So again, here you have the sovereignty of the Lamb. The Lamb was the one opening. They were given over to the fourth of the earth to kill. Well, that's with the sword. We saw a great sword was given to the red horse. Famine, we saw that certainly connected with inflation with the third horse. And here you have pestilence or disease, a fourth of the earth. And then as it relates to with the beasts of the earth, it's interesting too that pestilence, Chuck Missler used to talk about this, that many times when we think about wild beasts, we think about maybe a lion or a bear. And he said, well, there's no reason to assume that. It could be like beasts that you see in a microscope, bacteria, other living, a virus of some kind, small living. That's reasonable. And if you connect it with pestilence in the same that we understand things today, you take Ebola virus or something, some sort of other bacterial infection that is super, super deadly. It could mean that. But what we do know is that it says there that it brings up a number. This is going to be the first time in the book of Revelation out of 2 that you see a number. Here we have a fourth. Later we'll see a third. And so, a lot of people will say, well, is this automatically killing a fourth? Well, I don't know. You can argue it. Nevertheless, it was given they were given over a fourth of the earth to kill. So to me, I think that is a number. Currently, we have a little over 8 billion. So just in the first 4 seals that you have here, you have, excuse me, 2 billion people dying from these 3 things: sword, war, famine, inflation, and disease, which makes great sense. And then in that regard, again, after somebody's killed, the event that takes place is death and Hades. So they're swallowed up by death, and then because they're unbelievers, most likely at this time, they're going to go into Hades, which is very consistent with Luke chapter 16. So that's a lot of judgment that has been now given out by the Lamb and by the supernatural agency of one of the living creatures.
Yeah, that one right there, seriously, a fourth of the earth. I mean, that's powerful to all those people who perish. So this fifth seal always comes under a lot of scrutiny as well.
It does.
And it says, let me open this here, I can read it better. When the Lamb broke the fifth seal, I saw underneath the altar the souls of those who had been slain because of the word of God and because of the testimony which they had maintained. And they cried out with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, will you refrain from judging and avenging our blood on those who dwell on the earth? And there was given to each of them a white robe, and they were told that they should rest for a little while longer until the number of their fellow servants and their brethren who were to be killed, even as they had been, would be completed. Also, I'm emphasizing words for a reason, so go ahead. What does that mean?
So it's interesting too that because some people will ask, and I think it's a legitimate question, it takes a little bit of thought, is, well, if the first four are judgments, then how is this a judgment? Because we know that the sixth seal as well is a judgment. And I think that this is where you make a distinction between what we understand in understanding the church. In 1 Thessalonians 1 verse 10 and 1 Thessalonians 5:9, both of those in the context of really eschatology of the end time, that we're delivered from the wrath to come, and we're not appointed to this eschatological wrath, this 7-year tribulation. And so the church is exempt from that. Now, in Romans 5:9, you have a different kind of wrath there, which is talking about eternal wrath, like, judgment, lake of fire wrath. So in this sense, anybody that's not taken up in the rapture who maybe get saved, and here we have people that have come to know the Lord and who are being persecuted and who are giving a testimony, but yet they're being killed. So we know in Revelation 13:7 that this continues, that the Antichrist is actually, it says very clearly that he's given, it's a permission thing. He's given permission to continue to war against the believers at this time and to overcome them. That's contrary to what we would see in 1 Thessalonians 5, in chapter 1. But the reason why it's a judgment is during the tribulation period, we see this in Revelation 7, that in Revelation 7, you have the great multitude who I think are another representation of those that are coming out of the tribulation. And that they've suffered in the tribulation, because it says that one of the comments, it talks about them resting, no more harm to them, no more sadness or weeping or whatever. But one of the things it says, there'll be no more heat on them. Well, you think, okay, well, that's kind of a weird phrase, but yet we know later in the book of Revelation that one of the judgments is out on the sun, and the sun becomes hot. So these are people that are not exempt from this eschatological wrath of God, because I don't believe they're the church. So in this case, a judgment is told to them, hey guys, I appreciate your, basically, I'll paraphrase. I know you're looking for vengeance. You're wondering when it's going to stop. Here's some comfort. The judgment is set. It's not stopping until it's done. So in reality, when you look at people are trying to phrase this in a context of comfort. Mm-hmm. And it's very clear that there's a level of comfort, but in reality, what does the speaker tell them? Hey, there's more to come. It's not stopping. So the judgment is here, that the judgment language, the event that takes place here is this question, and the response is, it's only getting started. We're not done.
Brilliant. I can listen to you dissect this for a while. Okay, so Sandra, if you want to put that up on the board, though, that way they can get their questions ready. That would be great. Okay, so now we're going into the sixth seal. And I looked when he broke the sixth seal. I can't say that. And there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth made of hair, and the whole moon became like blood. And the stars of the sky fell to the earth as a fig tree casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. Then it continues to let us know what happens. And this is where a lot of people debate this as well because of the typology used in these verses. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it is rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Then the kings of the earth and the great men and the commanders and the rich and the strong and every slave and free man hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks and mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come. Who is able to stand? A lot to unpack there.
Mm-hmm. So
a lot.
Let me unpack a couple things here, because when we think about the chronology, the chronology of the book of Revelation, that's a whole hour-long program itself, because the way that it's organized, there's often what scholars will talk about as parenthetical chapters. Chapter 7 is one of them. Chapter 11 is another. Even chapter 12, 14. So 17, 18. There's these. You see some progression in the book of Revelation, and then you see kind of a pause. And you usually see this always after you have 6 things that happen, like this 6th seal, and then what do you have? You have basically a pause. Revelation 8:1. There's silence in heaven for a half hour before the 7th seal is open. So that we have to be careful how we phrase this. So what we have to remember too is that the 6th seal is not. It doesn't just happen and then it's over. The 6th seal begins and extends all the way to the end of the tribulation. So the 6th seal is kind of this starting. It starts, and then the ramifications go all the way to the end. Which I think that's why sometimes people get confused to go, well, when did the 6th seal start and end? I think the 6th seal began after certainly the 5th one, but it extends all the way through the 7 years. So another thing too, if we were to, I was reading some guy that was secular one time. And he was talking about this passage, and he said, look how stupid the Bible is. The Bible says in one sense that all of the mountains, it's really, really small for my eyes. It says the fig tree, there was a shaking, they split apart and riled up, and then there it is, every mountain an island removed out of their places. But then 2 verses later, you have the human beings hiding in the mountains. So that's a complete contradiction, and we might as well just go home and worship whatever we want, because now the Bible's got a contradiction in it, and look at that. Obviously the Bible doesn't contradict itself. So what's happening here in these verses, we have to be very careful, and in many ways we approach it with a level of humility, saying, well, what exactly does that mean that every mountain was moved? It is true that when you look at Scripture, there's an article out there. When does all or every always mean all or every last one without exception? And that's not necessarily true, because again, here's a perfect example. You have every mountain moved, but yet where were they hiding in the mountains at? So you have an event that takes place of this cosmic event that is reminding. It begins to show. That in a very, I would say, cosmic way. We've had these things that have happened on Earth. We've had some wars, we've had some pestilence, we've had famine, and now the very stars of heaven are falling, and the sky, there's Jesus says in Luke 21, you're going to see signs in the heavens that are going to cause people's heart to fail them for fear. And you have the response of the people saying, let's hide, because what we've been experiencing is the wrath of the Lamb, and who can survive? And it reminds you of what Jesus said in Matthew 24, that if that time period wasn't really restricted to at most, or at minimum 3.5 years in the Great Tribulation, or at most 7 years, nobody would survive. Every last human being would be killed on the earth.
They would. Okay, so let us go really quick to Revelation chapter 8, verse 1. because the seventh seal, which I'm assuming you're going to explain, so I'm not going to say anything. But a lot of people are like, well, where's the seventh seal? Well, it's wrapped up in chapter 8 because it leads to something else. So it says here, when the Lamb broke the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about a half hour. That's when they put me in timeout. And I saw the 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. So I can put us back here on the screen. So what say you? Did you keep that up, or you got it?
Yeah, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. So what say you on that verse then?
So again, what you have is the 7th seal is not just open and done with. Like, let's say that each of the first seal, chronology is a little tough in the beginning. You'll have people that claim they have it dialed down to the last day, which I don't think there's enough data to be that specific. But let's say that the first event starts out at the beginning of the tribulation, chapter 6, verse 2, and then you have war taking place. How long is that? A couple of years, maybe 1 year, 2 years, which leads to famine. Famine takes time. It's not going to. Famine doesn't just arrive in a day. Famine takes months, whatever. And then, of course, disease takes time to spread. So by the time you get to the 6th and 7th seal, where are we at in the tribulation? Are we in the 3rd year? Are we into the 4th year? We don't know exactly. And so, but what we do know is that from this, I would probably think that the 7th seal is going to begin right around the midpoint. Again, I can't prove that from anything in the text that would force that idea. You have some consistency with other passages, but we got to remember that the 7th seal begins there, kind of like the 6th seal. It begins and continues all the way through to the end, because out of the 7th seal comes the 7 trumpets. Out of the 7 trumpets, the 7th trumpet comes the 7 bowls. So the 7th seal itself is not done and over. Oh, that happened on this day. No, it began on that day, and its unpacking takes the rest of the tribulation to happen.
Makes sense. Yeah, I heard that a long time ago, that the 7th seal is opening what's happening next. Same thing with the trumpets, and the only one that doesn't have an opening to an opening, of course, is the bowls. Okay, well, you did great. Have you ever done that, like, in less than... Wow, that was a record.
This is a record time.
So we have a few questions to answer, and then I always like to end with something, so hopefully we can do that. If not, no worries. It's something that I found fascinating in Jeff Kinley's new book. So let's go to question number 1, Sandra, and we'll get these up as quick as we can. So this is coming in from Kathy Marie. So, Mondo, the souls under the altar, are they all the martyred since the cross? Or are they those martyred after the rapture and then in the trib? And are these the same as Rev 20 also? Thank you.
Okay. So I think, Kathy, you nailed it in the second part, that anybody that dies since the cross to now, their spirits in heaven, and then again, from my perspective, they get raptured. Jesus brings them back. They get reunited with their bodies that which have been resurrected from the earth, and so they're in their new bodies in heaven in the Lord, which I think is representative of the 24 elders. Totally different topic, but so these ones are martyred during the tribulation, because remember, during the tribulation, there's several different groups that are killing Christians, killing believers. Because look, we often talk about during the tribulation, these are tribulation saints or tribulation believers. I think that's legitimate, but they are Christians. People are still saved by believing in Jesus Christ, for sure. That's the only way to be saved. So, we could say they're tribulation Christian saints. So they're going to get saved, but they're there, they die, and they're waiting for the end. But in Revelation 20, those that have been, that it says, I saw those that were killed, and they're raised up. So those are the tribulation saints for the 7 years. Because why? Not in the first half of the tribulation, the harlot, the beast, the harlot system, the religious harlot system is killing and drinking the blood of the true believers. So you have several different groups that are committing genocide against Christians. One is the harlot, which she gets burned with fire in the middle of the tribulation. And then after that point, the beast system itself, with the mark of the beast, etc., is now killing and going after Christians. We see that in Revelation chapter 12 and Revelation 13:7.
All right. So next question is coming in for Tiffany. So there's a lot of questions tonight, guys, that I cannot put up because his time is limited. So this is coming in from Tiffany. Question: did I hear Mondo correctly that he doesn't believe that it is not two separate riders with the fourth seal, death and Hades?
So I would say on this, we got to remember there's the horse that comes, right? We death and Hades. We can't hyper literalize it here. These are the seal is opened. John is giving us these images, and so these are events. These are events that take place. Again, the Antichrist event. We have the war event. We have the famine event, and then we have the if we want to call it the death and Hades event on the pale horse that followed. So, I guess the question, if we were to hyper literalize it, we'd say, well, there's four horsemen. The white, the red, and then the black, and then the pale, and then we have death and Hades. So now we have six. But I don't think we even need to have that discussion necessarily, because death and Hades follows that. And so if we get too tied up in multiple horses, I would say we're missing the point, because these are figurative things that are pointing to the reality. And the reality is these are events that are taking place, that are happening and arriving as judgments.
Oh, you're on a roll tonight. Okay, so next question is coming in from Ren J. Question: during the tribulation, the locusts from hell are released and torture humanity for 5 months. The Bible says death will escape them. What is your opinion as to how that happens? Great question.
So this is later. We see this in Revelation chapter 9, in one of the later judgments. So to me, it reads pretty straightforward. I find this fascinating, and honestly, I've never read. I mean, I read a lot, obviously, in the sense of commentaries and stuff, but I don't think anybody has a grasp of what this actually means. Because imagine being tormented and death flees you, where you go put a bullet to your head and you don't die. I mean, I mean, would we say, if someone was to be dismembered, or maybe got the guillotine, they got their head cut off, that they're not going to die? I don't know if I would take the text to make it that extreme. I think there is a truth here, but sometimes the Bible does speak in hyperbole or other ways, again, when it uses language. So, and this, honestly, I have no idea. I mean, we know what it says, but it's hard for me to believe that if I dismember you, that somehow you're not going to be there, unless, I don't know. See, we could say, what this really means is that my consciousness is uploaded into a artificial intelligence, or to a computer, and therefore I'm still alive, even though my body's. We can go a lot of ways here, but I don't think anybody knows. That's kind of the fascinating thing about the book of Revelation, is it requires a certain level of humility. We see what the text says, but how does it play out? Oh man, your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, amen on that. I agree. I'm glad you said that. Okay, so our last question is, man, you did so good. And again, there was some that were there, and that's why I removed them, Sandra. Could not get to everyone, so we only have a few more minutes. So, and I always like to share something with the gospel or lead people to the Lord. So, no offense, Mondo, but that is more important than questions. So this is coming in, our very last one. So questions are closed, guys. I can't believe you've only been here. I'm sad. I'm like ready for a 3-hour marathon.
It's quick.
But you have other things. Okay, so Jamie, hello, sister, by the way. I cannot wait to have you on. So this is a question for you, Mondo. Do you think the first seal was open? Some say the sickness was the first seal.
So when she says the word sickness, is she referring to what's happened over the past few years, you think?
I think so. If I know Jamie, yes, that's what she's
okay, no, that's good, because, I try to avoid the word too, just for buzz, but you're not on YouTube, right? This isn't on YouTube necessarily.
Well, I am, and YouTube is probably going to ban me. I tell everyone to go to Rumble, because I'm on a thin line right now.
I would say, do I believe the first seal has been opened in the past? Absolutely not. I think it is 100% future. I think that, again, what you do see is this. I think I'm excited. I mean, I talk fast when I get excited. I'm excited about the Lord's return. I think, however, I have to control myself, because in my exuberance, in my emotion, I get excited. And when I look out at prophecy, I mean, I do this, 16 hours a day. I can allow myself to look at some current events, and then I can have it shape the way I interpret the Bible. I have to be really careful. They call that newspaper exegesis. We don't want to commit that crime, so to speak. And as I look over the past few years, there are some similarities to what you see in not only Matthew 24, but also in Revelation 6. But I would say that we got to remember that the little bit that we saw, I had a little bit of discomfort. Obviously, some people were sick, some people died. But if you look at the overall death rates, they're like, wow, the overall death rates pretty much stayed the same, because many people who normally die by other comorbidities perished and other things. Okay, we won't get into all that. There's no way, first of all, if we think about the first seal, so I'm not sure why the sickness was compared specifically to the first seal, because the first seal was the event of the Antichrist or his system, the beast system, coming on the scene. Now that was 2020. And now we're 3 years into it. Certainly the beast system is not here. The preparations are here. No doubt it's getting more and more every day. And the pestilence that we see, it's gone. And then in reality, you look and it kind of just killed off some of the weak. What you see in Revelation 6 in as it relates to the third and fourth seal, we're talking billions dead. Not even if it was just, again, 1/4 to kill through the sword, through famine, and through pestilence. So what we saw with COVID, it does not fit, except in a very typological or seed way. And the Bible cycles these things often. But if the first seal was open, it would mean we're in the tribulation. And man, again, I'm getting ready to go have a burrito, and I'm living life pretty casual. When the tribulation is here, the whole world is turned upside down. This normal living stuff is over.
Amen. Well, you've been a pleasure. Thank you so much. Would you just allow me? We still have 3 minutes. So I just always wanted to start reading this quote from Jeff Kinley's new book, God's Grand Finale. And it says, "Why are we allowed in heaven? Would you pause and reflect for a moment on this glorious and wonderful truth? We who were once depraved, unrighteous, dead in sin, separated from the life of God and condemned to a Christless eternity in hell, have now, by His grace, been saved, forgiven, adopted, brought near, made alive, made righteous, and given hope and eternal home in heaven." So I always say to everyone, if you're watching this broadcast, whether it be now or post, if you do not know Christ, I implore you today, time is running out. Make today the day of salvation, because we are not promised tomorrow. So Mondo, thank you again for being on here. I could not wait until our next 2 episodes. Have fun digging caves and make sure you don't get bit by bats. Be safe while you're doing it. And do you have any closing remarks for anyone in the chat or post or whatever?
I think that I'll just go back. What you said was awesome. I mean, we're here for the gospel. A lot of this stuff is fun and exciting in that it shows us that Jesus is coming back. I'm not excited about the tribulation. I'm not excited about the Jews building a temple. I mean, I've been writing a lot about the red heifers lately, and I'm not excited necessarily about the red heifers only for the reason that those things point to what's behind the tribulation. And as we look at the world, we know the world's evil. We think about human trafficking and sex trafficking and all the abuse and all the horrible things. I lost my 26-year-old nephew in the last 2 weeks to a car crash. And you see this and it saddens you. But what we do know is that these things that are happening excites me, because Jesus is coming back to make the world right and to produce a world that's filled with righteousness, where God gets all the glory and we get to participate in that. I mean, and so at the end of the day, seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness. Matthew 6:33. That really is the goal for all of us. Whatever we're doing, you could be an engineer, you could be whatever you do it for the glory of God, but always be ready to be a witness and a light, and to do good and to speak truth in love.
Amen. All right, so just hang tight 2 seconds. So we're going to end this broadcast, Sandra. So you got all the buttons though, girl? All right, so guys, until I see you here, there, or join us really quick, on August 25th, that's going to be our first Just Unplug episode. It's going to be me and Sandra, and we have something very fun and funky planned. So please tune in. I wanted to add an extra podcast. My life says I do not have time for that. So these Just Unplugs are going to be a random Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern. But anyway, so I forgot who's coming on next week. I feel like it's somebody, but I can't remember right now. But join me and Sandra for our first Just Unplug episode on August 25th. It's going to be a good time. So anyway, you guys have an amazing evening until I see you here, there, or in the air. Bye. Thank you for listening to this week's podcast. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, head on over to our website, LifeClipsPodcast.com, to find out more information. If you have questions, comments, or concerns, send us an email at questions@LifeClipsPodcast.com. And as I always end it, I will see you here, there, or in the air.
Titus chapter 2, verse 13, looking for the blessed hope and the appearing of the glory of our great God and Savior, Christ Jesus.